So this video is going to be basically comparing and contrasting a Phoenix Strike Assassin in 2.6 using Mosaic Claws with a Dragon Tail focused Assassin that also uses Phoenix Strike using Mosaic Claws. So there are two different approaches here that I'm talking about. The reason I'm bringing this up is because Teo has a recent build guide that's updated. What's his name? Teo 1904. This is a great build guide for Phoenix Strike. It's got really well developed max roll, as you would expect since he's a max roll creator. But this is doing something different than what I was planning on doing, in which a lot of the veteran players that I've seen discussing the new Mosaic runeword on D2JSP have agreed, is that the character that benefits the most from the changes that you get with the Mosaic runeword are players and characters that use Dragon Tail. So kind of there's two things to get hype about when you're talking about the Mosaic runeword. One is that it makes skills that were completely inviable before usable now, and that's great. But it also makes a skill that was viable before even better now, and that is Dragon Tail. So in terms of exploring new things, maybe you want to go for a Phoenix Strike focused build, so you can kind of enjoy some of the new things in the game. If you want to enjoy something that is now stronger and less inconvenient to use than before, with a side dish of some of the new stuff, like Claws of Thunder, then you want to do something more like what I'm doing. So first off, what is Teo doing here? So he is doing a Phoenix Strike focused assassin, and he is maxing out Claws of Thunder so that he gets a nice chain lightning, and he's going to get a nice Nova. And he is using Dragon Talon to deliver his finishing blows. So every time he uses Dragon Talon, the first of these 7 kicks will deliver it'll release charge 3 of the Chaos Ice Bolt. It looks like he's actually going to do charge 2, so he's going to charge up twice and do chain lightning damage, so he's not dumping any points into Blades of Ice. And then he's going to do 3 charges of Claws of Thunder, so the first kick of Dragon Talon is going to release, it's going to have this 8,361 lightning damage added to the kicks themselves. Then the first kick will release Nova damage, and then the first kick will also release Charge Bolt. He has Fists of Fire here. I'm unclear on if he's actually going to charge this up all the way and actually use this, or if he's using this for a passive effect that it has that's not documented very well throughout Diablo or the D2 max roll build for this. But basically, any levels that you have in Fist of Fire convert some of the physical damage of the finishing move that you use to release. It converts it to fire damage. So if you have a Dragon Talon that's doing all physical damage based on your boot damage, and then you do Fists of Fire damage to convert that into fire damage, it increases the kick damage of the Dragon Talon by changing it to fire, and then things that affect fire damage would apply. So if you look at his calculations, you can see his damage per second here is 105,000, and it's almost all fire damage. Do you see how, like, the actual damage here is Fists of Fire gives a flat 3,519. So that comes from here, flat 3,199 to 3,519. So you see that on the Dragon Talon damage sheet right here. And then the converted damage is actually more than double that. So 6,238 to 10,021 converted damage. That is the physical damage from his boot. These Myrmidon Greaves is 83 to 149. That is getting scaled up through the 285% kick damage. And I think it's also getting scaled by this 2,700 Tiger Strike damage. And then it is getting converted 100% to fire. So that's great. That sounds really cool. So what he's going to have going on is a bunch of lightning damage from the actual Claws of Thunder and Phoenix Strike, then a bunch of fire damage from Dragon Talon, and he's going to be doing 7 kicks, and those kicks go off pretty fast. So it looks like it will take 35 frames to get off the 7 kicks, and that's cool. This seems like a really neat use of Mosaic, and I think this will be really flashy. But I do think that there is a better way to do this. And essentially that is instead of using Dragon Talon and Fists of Fire, you use Dragon Tail, no points in Fist and Fire. So let's go to a super min-maxed for damage assassin max roll for um, Dragon Dragon Tail. So this is what the tree looks like. You've got max Tiger Strike, max Dragon Tail, and then max Claws of Thunder and max Phoenix Strike. You don't actually need Claws of Thunder or Phoenix Strike to do Dragon Tail. It's just going to add some nice Nova damage. So you can see we're doing 5k Nova damage, or 2,500 on average because it's 1 to 5,000. And then our Chain Lightning does 1 to 10,000, so it's like basically 5,500 average damage. And this is just for AoE clear. The single target of this build is almost entirely from Dragon Tail. Dragon Tail does kick in a 4-yard radius, so it's not just single target. It does have some AoE component to it, especially compared to Dragon Talon, which only attacks one enemy. But what we've basically got here is Dragon Tail, and the way that Dragon Tail's damage calculation works is it takes your physical kick, and then it multiplies that by the Tiger Strike. If you had other sources of percent damage, such as Fortitude, it would be added to this. For that reason, adding the percent damage from Fortitude has very little effect because we already have 3,420% percent damage added here from Tiger Strike. Then that gets multiplied by the fire damage here of 10,090 or 1,090%, and essentially this makes for a huge kick. So how big is the kick? Good God. So that is the damage. So the fire explosion damage is doing 6,430 or 643,000. What? I had to do a double take because it's actually so much. And we're kicking 3.57 times per second. So just to go back to contrast, the Dragon Talon is taking 35 frames to do 7 hits, which comes out to 106,000 damage. You're getting basically mostly getting lightning damage from Phoenix Strike and Claws of Thunder, and then in contrast to that, now this is like insane gear. I'll go over the actual gear in this in a second. But Dragon Tail on the high end, which Teo's build is no slouch. Like he's got some insane rares in here. These boots are crazy. Really, you just need the Mere Midden Greaves for the base kick damage. But this build is using, equally difficult to achieve things. So like this has strength on it for damage. This has strength and martial arts for damage. Enigma, strength for damage. This has dex. I don't know exactly why it has dex, but anyway, the point is this is doing 7 frames per attack, which is 3.57 hits per second, and each hit is doing 4.3 or 0.43 to 0.64 million damage for a total of 2 million damage per second. Now, the sheet DPS of Dragon Tail is deceiving, and it's deceiving in a few ways, but it's converted damage, and that's what makes it deceiving. In this use case, this is one of the rare uses in the game where another skill is equally as deceiving. So Dragon Tail in this case is doing physical damage, which is converted to fire damage, and it is the same problem that Dragon Tail encounters. So Dragon Tail, let's say you are hitting a target dummy. I think that's what we're calculating here. Yeah, so target dummy on both builds, right? Let me just make sure. Oh, he's actually got his against Bale, so let's fix that. So once we're against Bale, Dragon Tail is doing 1.139 million damage per second. And basically that's because Bale, we'll take a look at Bale's stats. Bale has a base fire res of 50%, and he has a base damage reduction of 50%. So that means that, let's say your Dragon Tail is going to hit for 100 damage, and it's going against Bale with 50% physical damage reduction. Well, now it's hitting for 50 physical damage, which is then converted to fire damage. Then the 50 fire damage, it only takes 50% of that because Bale has 50% fire res. So now you're doing 25 damage. So you can see how physical and fire mitigation on an enemy stack multiplicatively against the damage of Dragon Tail, just like physical and fire damage stack multiplicatively to create the damage of Dragon Tail. So it creates a huge sheet DPS, and that's great. But unless you do things to strip physical damage reduction of your enemy or fire resistance of your enemy, you will not be doing that sheet DPS. You will be doing less. And in this case, we are doing pretty well. So we've got different ways to reduce the fire res. So Conviction reduces Bale's fire res from 50% to negative 85%. That's very powerful, or negative 35%. That's very powerful. And then we are using Amplify Damage from Atma Scarab to reduce his physical damage reduction by 100%. That takes him from 50% to negative 50%. So against a target dummy that has no resistances, we'd be at negative 85% fire res, and we'd be at negative 100% physical damage reduction. So you can take advantage of those things, or basically make sure that they're not cutting your damage by a lot. But the point that I'm trying to make is that you've got to be careful about looking at the sheet DPS of Dragon Tail and thinking that you're actually doing that amount of damage if you are not doing something like Amplify Damage and Conviction Aura. So what else is going on here? This character also has this Claws of Thunder doing, 2,500 lightning damage, and it's got the Phoenix Strike going off. So why would you use Dragon Talon instead of Dragon Tail? Well, there's a few situations. One of them is that Dragon Talon hits 7 times if you max it out, whereas Dragon Tail only hits once. So if you're doing things that need lots of hits, like Crushing Blow, Dragon Talon is pretty good. Although I don't know if you'd want to do that with Fists of Fire, because I'm not sure if the Crushing Blow works if you're 100% converted to fire. The other thing is that Dragon Tail kicks enemies back, which some people find very annoying. So it says knock back your enemies with an explosive kick. That sounds like a positive, but if you don't kill them in one kick, it means you have to take a stutter step before you can kick them again, and it also might kick them out of range of your mercenary who's hitting them. And overall, it also just like spreads out a pack. So if you kick the mob that's in the middle of a pack and you don't kill the whole pack with your 4-yard AoE from this, it's going to push all the enemies back, and then they're out of your 4-yard. So the next time that you do your Dragon Tail, you're not actually hitting all of them that you hit the first time. So the knockback is kind of annoying, and is the reason that Dragon Tail kind of needs some help for clear. And that's the purpose in my iteration of this, to use Phoenix Strike and Claws of Thunder, is just to have this lightning damage there to kind of clean up, kill some stragglers. If you telestomp with Dragonflight onto a shaman and then do Dragon Tail, you're for sure going to kill the shaman. But the Claws of Thunder and Phoenix Strike will help clean up the rest of the camp, if you will. So what else do we have going on here? We've got a max fade for 35% damage reduction. I don't think I'm actually using fade. Yeah, I'm actually using burst of speed in this setup. But realistically, you just use fade. Like, you don't actually need the extra that takes you from 8 frames per second to 7 frames per second, frames per attack, I mean, on your Dragon Tail. You don't actually need that speed from burst of speed. You really do need the resist from fade, though. And also 35% damage reduction is insane, plus the 8% here and 8% here gets you to the max damage reduction of 50% on the Assassin. And there it is, 50%. And also fade makes you basically immune to curses. And then in terms of defenses, both of them have this going on, but you've got your weapon block, which is a 58% chance, 57% chance if you have less plus skills, and your weapon block comes out to 58% here. Your hit recovery is pretty good on this build. That's all coming from Shadow Dancers, which is why Shadow Dancers is a pretty good set of boots for this build. And then your actual block rate with weapon block is super slow. So that's one of the downsides of using weapon block. There's no way to speed it up either. So the great thing about weapon block is it blocks spells, secondary damage like explosions, and it blocks attacks versus normal block only blocks attacks. But the downside is that it's slow block. So if you're getting hit in rapid succession from some damage source, like lightning enchanted monsters, for instance, would hit you with all those charged lightning bolts, you'd probably only block one of those per proc of the lightning bolts coming out of the monster. But anyway, I digress. The main thing I wanted to talk about was that Dragon Tail is a better finishing move than Dragon Talon. And even when you consider for Phoenix Strike, if you're focusing on Phoenix Strike, I don't think you want to use Dragon Talon because you're only going to release, we'll go back to Teo's setup here, you're only going to release your Claws of Thunder and your Phoenix Strike every 7th kick, which takes 35 freaking frames. That's more than a second in between releases, which is way slower than just doing Dragon Tail and releasing it every 7th or 8th frame. Or if you're really focusing on Phoenix Strike, you might go for Dragon Claw. You can release charges every 5 frames. You'll do 2 hits every 10 frames and release a bunch of these things. So last thing I wanted to talk about was why are neither of these builds focusing on Dragonflight? So Teo is using Enigma, and I think this is a mistake. He must have a plan to get a +1 or +1 to 3 Dragonflight on one of his Mosaic Claws, but you really want to use Dragonflight to telestomp on this build. So he's going to be using Enigma to get around, as will my version of the build with Dragon Tail as the focus. But you really do want to telestomp with Dragonflight to release all this crap right when you land on the enemy. If you have your Blades of Ice up, it's going to freeze everything and do a bunch of AoE damage, and it's just going to be great. If you just Enigma teleport onto the monster, you then have to do Dragon Tail, or in his case, Dragon Talon. But the reason that you don't pump points into Dragonflight is because it doesn't really impact the damage that much. So just to illustrate this, this is the Dragon Tail version of the build. I know I keep flipping back and forth and it's confusing, but we'll go down, we'll look at Dragonflight, and we can see the damage here. So it's doing 20k to 30k physical damage, which is insane just off the bat. And you can see that the off weapon increases to physical damage that it's getting. It's getting 826% from attributes because this is a meme build with max strength. And then it's getting a skill bonus from Dragonflight itself, giving 1045%. It's getting 260%, which is a measly amount from Might. And then it's getting 3,420% from Tiger Strike. So the more points you put into Dragonflight, we'll take a look here. We'll go 0, or I guess we got to do 1 there. And then we'll max this one out. We'll go back and take a look. And you can see it didn't really change that much. So now it's at 4,000 to 10,000 more damage by getting the skill bonus from like 1,000 to 1710%. That's not that much more damage considering that you put 20 points into it. It would be way better to have your Nova do more damage from Claws of Thunder, or to invest in something else like Shadow Warrior or something. So you always just want to do 1 point in Dragonflight because this kick damage percentage is additive with Tiger Strike, Might Aura, and your Strength damage bonus instead of multiplicative. So don't waste points doing 20 points in Dragonflight. Dragonflight is amazing, and telestomping on monsters is amazing, and it's going to be really fun, but pumping points into Dragonflight unintuitively is not the best way to make that more fun. That's just going to waste points. You want to pump things into these things instead to make Dragonflight telestomping more fun. Alright, I think that is a long enough explanation. I'm pushing on 20 minutes now, going over the differences between this Phoenix Phoenix Strike by Teo versus this is Dragon Tail by somebody on JSP with some adjustments from me. And I hope that helps explain why we're doing these differences. Kind of explains why I think that using Dragon Talon as the finishing move to release a Phoenix Strike Assassin's main abilities is a mistake and should instead probably be Dragon Claw, or in my case, I prefer Dragon Tail. And also explains some of the damage calculations that go into physical to fire converted damage in Diablo 2 Resurrected, namely with Dragon Talon when it's converted using Fists of Fire, and for Dragon Tail with its inherent physical to fire damage conversion, and why amplify damage and conviction aura are both so important for scaling the damage of these builds. All right, thanks. Bye.